The morning sun beat down on Fort Carson's main training field, where 500 soldiers stood in formation. Lieutenant Sarah Chen kept her eyes forward, her posture perfect despite the weight of every stare pressing against her back. She was the only woman in the Advanced Combat Readiness Program, the only one who'd made it through the selection process, and on this particular morning, she was about to become Sergeant Marcus Webb's favorite target. Well, 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 Webb's voice boomed across the field as he strutted toward her position. Look what we have here, gentlemen, a little lady playing soldier. Sarah didn't flinch. She'd heard worse, much worse. Webb was a mountain of a man, 6'4" and built like a tank. He'd been an Army Ranger for 15 years, and he wore his reputation like armor. He had a thick neck, arms that strained against his uniform sleeves, and a sneer that seemed permanently etched on his face. "You know what I think," Webb continued, circling Sarah like a predator. "I think you got here because someone felt sorry for you. I think you're taking up space that belongs to a real warrior." The other soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. A few smirked, enjoying the show. Sarah remained silent, her jaw tight. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Webb leaned in close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. "Cat got your tongue, or are you finally realizing you don't belong here?" Colonel James Patterson stood on the observation platform 30 yards away, watching through narrowed eyes. He'd heard the complaints about Webb's behavior, heard the whispers about how he treated female soldiers, but Webb got results. His units performed well, and in the Army, results often spoke louder than ethics. Still, something about this moment felt different. Patterson had reviewed Sarah Chen's file personally. What he'd found there had surprised even him. "Sergeant Webb," Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm and clear. "With all due respect, I've earned my place here just like everyone else." Webb's laugh was harsh and ugly. "Earned it? You want to talk about earning things?" He stepped even closer, invading her personal space. "I've served in 3 war zones, girl. I've seen things that would make you cry yourself to sleep. What have you done except check some diversity box?" Sarah's hands tightened into fists at her sides, but her face remained neutral. "I don't need to prove anything to you, Sergeant." "Oh, but you do," Webb said, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. "Because I'm about to make your life here so miserable that you'll quit by the end of the week. That's a promise." He reached out and poked her shoulder hard with one thick finger. "You're soft, weak, and you're going to." "Sergeant Webb," Colonel Patterson's voice cut through the air like a whip. He'd left the platform and was striding toward them. "That's enough." Webb stepped back, but his expression didn't change. "Just giving the new recruit some motivation, sir." "We'll discuss your motivational techniques later," Patterson said coldly. "Right now, we have a demonstration scheduled." The demonstration was part of the advanced program's orientation. Each instructor would showcase a particular combat technique. Webb was scheduled to demonstrate close-quarters defense tactics. "Actually, sir," Webb said, a cruel smile spreading across his face, "I have a better idea. Why don't we let our special recruit here help with the demonstration, show everyone what she's got?" Patterson hesitated. He could see where this was going. Webb wanted to humiliate Sarah in front of the entire formation. "I volunteer, sir," Sarah said quietly. Patterson looked at her, searching her face. Her eyes were steady, calm, almost too calm. "Very well," he said finally. "Proceed." Webb's smile widened. "Excellent. Now in close-quarters combat, size and strength usually win. Let me demonstrate." He positioned himself in front of Sarah. "The scenario is simple. I'm an enemy combatant. She needs to defend herself and neutralize the threat." He glanced at the assembled soldiers. "Pay attention, gentlemen. This is what happens when feelings trump fitness." Sarah stood relaxed, her breathing even. "Ready?" Webb asked, not waiting for an answer. "Let's see what you've got, Navy SEAL wannabe." He moved forward aggressively, reaching to grab her. And that's when Sarah spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the silent field. "I'm not a wannabe," she said. "I am a Navy SEAL." Webb froze for just a second, confusion flickering across his face. Then he laughed. "Right, and I'm an astronaut. Come on, let's." He lunged forward, trying to grab her by the shoulders. It was a move designed to overpower, to use his superior size and weight. Sarah didn't retreat. She didn't try to match his strength. What happened next occurred so fast that most of the soldiers would later struggle to describe it accurately. Some would say they blinked and missed it. Others would insist they saw every detail but couldn't quite believe their eyes. Sarah sidestepped Webb's lunge with the precision of a dancer, her movements fluid and controlled. As his momentum carried him forward, she struck. Her hand moved in a blur, targeting the nerve cluster just above his knee with surgical accuracy. Webb's leg buckled. His eyes went wide with shock. But Sarah wasn't done. As he started to fall, she pivoted, using his own weight and motion against him. Her arm came up in a defensive arc, and her elbow connected with his thigh in exactly the right spot, or the wrong spot, depending on your perspective. The sound was audible even 30 feet away, a sharp crack that made several soldiers wince. Webb screamed. It wasn't a yell of anger or surprise. It was a genuine cry of pain as he collapsed to the ground, clutching his leg. His face had gone white, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. "Medic!" someone shouted. The formation broke as soldiers rushed forward. Colonel Patterson was already running, his phone out to call for medical assistance. Sarah stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable. She hadn't moved from her spot, hadn't followed up, hadn't gloated. She simply stood there, breathing calmly, while chaos erupted around her. Webb was on his back now, gasping for air. His hands were wrapped around his upper thigh, and even through his uniform pants, everyone could see the unnatural angle. His femur, one of the strongest bones in the human body, had fractured. The medics arrived within minutes. As they worked on Webb, stabilizing him for transport, Colonel Patterson turned to Sarah. "My office," he said quietly, "now." Sarah nodded and followed him across the field. Behind them, they could hear Webb groaning as the medics prepared to move him onto a stretcher. The 500 soldiers watched in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Patterson's office was Spartan and efficient. He closed the door and gestured for Sarah to sit. She remained standing. "Talk to me," Patterson said, his voice carefully neutral. "What exactly just happened out there?" "Self-defense, sir," Sarah replied. "Sergeant Webb initiated physical contact in an aggressive manner. I responded appropriately to neutralize the threat." Patterson studied her for a long moment. "Lieutenant Chen, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Did you intentionally break his leg?" Sarah met his gaze without blinking. "No, sir. I executed a standard defensive maneuver. The injury was an unfortunate consequence of Sergeant Webb's aggressive approach combined with his own body mechanics." "Standard defensive maneuver," Patterson repeated slowly. He sat down at his desk and pulled up a file on his computer. "Your service record says you transferred from Naval Special Warfare Command 6 months ago. It says you were an intelligence specialist." "That's correct, sir. But it doesn't say you were a SEAL. In fact, when I heard you make that claim out there, I assumed it was some kind of psychological tactic." Sarah's expression didn't change. "Sir, may I ask what classification level you have access to?" Patterson's eyebrows rose. "I have a top-secret clearance, Lieutenant. Why?" "Then, with respect, sir, you don't have access to the full version of my file, only the cover story." The room went very quiet. Outside, they could hear the ambulance siren as it pulled away, taking Webb to the hospital. Patterson leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah with new eyes. "Are you telling me you're actually a Navy SEAL? A real one?" "I'm telling you that parts of my service record are classified above your clearance level, sir," But yes, I graduated from Bud S training 3 years ago. I served with SEAL Team 3 for 18 months before being reassigned to a specialized unit. Patterson felt his understanding of the situation shift dramatically. Women had only recently been allowed to attempt SEAL training, and as far as he knew, only a handful had succeeded. The failure rate was over 75% for everyone who tried, regardless of gender. "Why transfer to the Army?" he asked. "Why come here at all?" Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in her composure. "That information is classified, sir. What I can tell you is that I'm here to complete a specific assignment. The Advanced Combat Readiness Program is part of that assignment. An assignment that requires you to maintain a low profile, I'm guessing," Patterson said, "which you just completely blew by breaking Sergeant Webb's leg in front of 500 witnesses." "He initiated contact, sir, multiple times. He poked me. He invaded my personal space. He made verbal threats, and then he attempted to physically grab me in what any reasonable person would interpret as an aggressive manner." Patterson couldn't argue with that. He'd seen the whole thing. More importantly, 500 other soldiers had seen it too. "There's going to be an investigation," he said. "You know that." "Yes, sir." "Webb is well connected. He has friends in high places. This could get complicated." "I understand, sir." Patterson sighed and rubbed his temples. "What exactly did you do to his leg?" The medic said it looked like a clean fracture, but in an unusual location. "I utilized a nerve strike to compromise his stance, then delivered a focused impact to the femoral shaft while his weight was distributed improperly. The combination of forces resulted in structural failure of the bone." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was describing how to change a tire. The investigation began within hours. By sunset, Sarah was sitting in a conference room with 2 lieutenant colonels and a major from the Inspector General's office. They'd already interviewed a dozen witnesses. They'd reviewed the footage from the field cameras that recorded all training exercises. And they'd visited Sergeant Marcus Webb in the hospital, where he was recovering from surgery to repair his shattered femur. Major Sandra Reeves led the questioning. She was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd spent 20 years in the Army, and she'd seen every kind of incident report imaginable. But this one was unusual. "Lieutenant Chen," Reeves began, "I want to make sure I understand the sequence of events correctly. Sergeant Webb approached you during formation. He made disparaging comments about your presence in the program. Then he poked you with his finger. Is that accurate?" "Yes, ma'am." "And then what happened?" Colonel Patterson intervened verbally. "Sergeant Webb suggested I participate in a combat demonstration. I volunteered. During the demonstration, Sergeant Webb initiated physical contact by attempting to grab me. I defended myself." "Defended yourself?" Reeves repeated. She glanced at her notes. "The medical report says his femur was fractured in 2 places. The surgeon said it was one of the cleanest breaks they'd ever seen, almost surgical in precision." Sarah said nothing. "Multiple witnesses say the entire encounter lasted less than 3 seconds, Reeves continued. "Sergeant Webb, who outweighs you by at least 80 pounds and has 15 years of combat experience, was on the ground before most people realized you'd moved." "Self-defense training, ma'am. I reacted instinctively." Reeves leaned forward. "See, that's what's interesting, Lieutenant. We pulled your official service record. According to that record, you're an intelligence specialist. Some computer work, some analysis, some liaison duty. Nothing that would explain how you took down one of our most experienced combat instructors in under 3 seconds." The 2 lieutenant colonels were watching Sarah carefully, waiting for her response. "Ma'am, I believe there's been some confusion about my background," Sarah said carefully. "I'd like to request that you contact Captain Michael Torres at Naval Special Warfare Command. He can clarify certain aspects of my training and experience." Reeves made a note. "We'll do that, but for now I need you to explain in your own words how you acquired the skills to do what you did today." Sarah took a breath. This was the moment she'd been dreading. Her assignment required discretion, anonymity. She was supposed to blend in, observe, and report back to her command on integration challenges faced by special operations personnel transitioning to conventional units. Instead, she'd broken a sergeant's leg in front of half a battalion. "Ma'am, I graduated from basic underwater demolition SEAL training 34 months ago. I served with SEAL Team 3 for 18 months before being reassigned. My current posting is part of a classified research program examining integration protocols for special operations personnel." The room went silent. "You're telling me you're a Navy SEAL," Reeves said slowly. "An actual SEAL." "Yes, ma'am. And the Army knew this when they accepted your transfer." "Certain individuals within the Army were aware." "Yes, ma'am. The program I'm part of is Joint Service. It's designed to study how special operations training and mindset translate to conventional military structures." One of the lieutenant colonels, a man named Davidson, spoke up. "Why wasn't this information in your file? Why the cover story?" "Because the research is designed to observe authentic interactions, sir. If soldiers knew my background, they'd treat me differently. The data would be compromised." "Well, the data is definitely compromised now," Reeves said dryly. "What exactly were you supposed to be studying?" Sarah hesitated. "Integration challenges, ma'am. Specifically, how female special operations personnel are received and treated when working with conventional units. The program was designed to identify systemic issues and develop solutions." "And you found some systemic issues," Davidson said, "in the form of Sergeant Webb." "Sergeant Webb represents a broader problem, sir. But yes, his behavior this morning was consistent with patterns we've been documenting." Reeves sat back in her chair. "Lieutenant, I'm going to be straight with you. This is a mess. Sergeant Webb has filed a formal complaint. He's claiming you assaulted him without provocation. He's demanding your removal from the program and suggesting criminal charges." Sarah's expression didn't change. "He initiated physical contact, ma'am. There are 500 witnesses and video footage." "I know, I've watched the footage a dozen times, and every time I watch it I see the same thing. Webb lunges at you. You move. He ends up on the ground with a broken leg." Reeves paused. "But here's the problem. Webb is saying you used excessive force, that you could have simply stepped aside or restrained him without causing serious injury." "Ma'am, Sergeant Webb outweighs me by 80 pounds. He has a significant reach advantage. He initiated contact in an aggressive manner during what was supposed to be a training demonstration. I used the minimum force necessary to neutralize what I perceived as a genuine threat." "A genuine threat," Reeves repeated, "in front of 500 witnesses on a training field in broad daylight." "Threats don't stop being threats just because there are witnesses, ma'am." Davidson leaned forward. "Lieutenant Chen, let me ask you something. Could you have stopped Sergeant Webb without breaking his leg?" It was the question Sarah had been expecting, the question she'd been dreading. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, "I could have." The three investigators stared at Sarah, waiting for her to elaborate. "I'm tired," she repeated, her voice gaining strength. "I'm tired of being poked. I'm tired of being mocked. I'm tired of having my qualifications questioned and my presence resented. I'm tired of men like Sergeant Webb who think they can intimidate me, harass me, and push me around just because I'm a woman." Major Reeves held up a hand. "Lieutenant Chen." "Ma'am, with respect, I need to finish." Sarah's composure was cracking now, revealing the frustration she'd been holding back for months. "Do you know what it's like to graduate from one of the hardest military training programs in the world, only to have people assume you got there because of your gender? Do you know what it's like to be told every single day that you don't belong? I have some idea, Reeves said quietly. Then you understand why, when Sergeant Webb came at me this morning, I didn't just step aside. I didn't restrain him gently. I didn't give him the opportunity to save face. Sarah's hands were clenched. I responded the way I was trained, the way any SEAL would respond to an aggressive threat. But he wasn't a real threat, Davidson argued. He was a bully, sure, an asshole, absolutely, but he wasn't going to seriously hurt you. Wasn't he? Sarah's voice was sharp. Sir, how many female soldiers has Sergeant Webb trained over his 15-year career? How many has he hazed, harassed, or driven out of programs they'd earned the right to be in? How many of them filed complaints that went nowhere because Webb gets results? The investigators exchanged glances. They'd already started pulling Webb's history. What they'd found was troubling. We're aware of Sergeant Webb's record, Reeves said carefully. There have been complaints. 17 complaints in 6 years, Sarah said. I did my research before coming here. 17 women filed official grievances about his behavior, verbal harassment, unwanted physical contact, creating hostile training environments. And what happened to those complaints? Lieutenant Chen. Nothing happened to them. They disappeared into the bureaucracy. Webb got a few counseling sessions, a couple of written reprimands that never made it into his permanent file, and he kept right on doing what he was doing because the system protected him. Reeves sighed. You're not wrong, but breaking his leg wasn't the answer. Maybe not, Sarah admitted, but it's the answer I gave, and honestly, ma'am, I'm not sorry. The room fell silent again. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the base. Finally, Reeves spoke. We contacted Captain Torres at Naval Special Warfare Command. He confirmed your story, all of it. He also said you were one of the top performers in your SEAL team. He said you had a spotless record until this incident. Yes, ma'am. He also said something interesting. He said you volunteered for this research program specifically because you wanted to help other women who might face the same challenges you did. Sarah nodded. That's correct, ma'am. So help me understand, Davidson said. You volunteered for a program designed to study and solve integration problems, but instead of documenting Sergeant Webb's behavior and working through official channels, you broke his leg in front of 500 people. How does that help your mission? It was a fair question. Sarah had been asking herself the same thing all afternoon. It doesn't, sir, she said honestly. I failed my mission. I let my emotions override my judgment. I reacted instead of responding. And now the program I'm part of is probably finished because I couldn't control myself for 3 seconds. That's a pretty harsh self-assessment, Reeves observed. It's accurate, ma'am. Reeves exchanged looks with her colleagues. They discussed this privately before Sarah arrived. They'd reviewed the evidence, consulted with their superiors, and considered their options. Lieutenant Chen, Reeves said, we've made some decisions. First, there will be no criminal charges. The video clearly shows Sergeant Webb initiating physical contact. You have a legitimate self-defense claim. Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. However, Reeves continued, there will be consequences. You'll be formally reprimanded for using excessive force. That reprimand will go in your permanent file. I understand, ma'am. You'll also be removed from the Advanced Combat Readiness Program, effective immediately. Sarah had expected that. Yes, ma'am. But Reeves said, and there was something different in her voice now, your research assignment isn't over. In fact, we're expanding it. Sarah looked up surprised. Davidson leaned forward. Lieutenant, your little demonstration this morning had some unintended consequences. By tomorrow, every soldier on this base will know your story. They'll know you're a SEAL. They'll know you took down Webb, and they'll be watching to see what happens next. Sir, I don't understand. What happens next, Reeves explained, is that you become a test case. We're going to put you in a regular infantry unit. No special treatment, no advance warning to the command staff about your background. You'll be just another lieutenant trying to lead soldiers. But they'll all know who I am, Sarah protested. Exactly, Reeves said with a slight smile. They'll know you're a SEAL. They'll know you can back up your authority with action if needed. And we're going to watch how that affects unit dynamics, respect, and cohesion. Sarah was beginning to understand. You're turning my mistake into part of the research. We're making lemonade out of lemons, Davidson said. The quiet observation phase of your mission was always going to end eventually. This just moved up the timeline. There's one more thing, Reeves added. Sergeant Webb is being investigated. Properly investigated this time. All 17 of those complaints are being reviewed. The Army is finally taking a hard look at how we handle harassment and hostile work environments. Because I broke his leg, Sarah said quietly. Because you made it impossible to ignore, Reeves corrected. Sometimes the system needs a shock to start working the way it's supposed to. 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of her platoon for the first time. 32 soldiers, mostly men, all watching her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and, in a few cases, respect. They knew who she was. Everyone on Fort Carson knew who she was by now. The story of how she'd broken Sergeant Webb's leg had spread through the military grapevine like wildfire. Some versions were exaggerated. Some were surprisingly accurate. But they all ended the same way, with Webb on the ground and Sarah standing over him. "Good morning," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the formation. "I'm Lieutenant Chen. Some of you have heard stories about me. Some of those stories are true. Some are bullshit. But here's what matters. I'm your platoon leader now, and my job is to make sure you're ready for whatever comes next." She paused, meeting the eyes of several soldiers in the front row. "I'm not going to lie to you," she continued. "I'm going to push you hard. I'm going to demand your best. And I'm not going to accept excuses. But I'm also going to listen to you, learn from you, and lead by example." One of the soldiers, a specialist named Jackson, raised his hand. "Ma'am, is it true you're a Navy SEAL?" Sarah smiled slightly. "It's true. I graduated from Bud S training 3 years ago. I served with SEAL Team 3 before transferring here." "So why are you in the Army now?" another soldier called out. "Because the military is changing," Sarah said. "Women are being integrated into combat roles, into special operations, into positions that were closed to us for decades. And that change is hard. It's uncomfortable. It brings up questions about standards, about fairness, about what makes someone qualified to lead." She walked along the front of the formation, her boots crunching on the gravel. "I'm here to help answer those questions. I'm here to prove that qualifications matter more than gender. That respect is earned through competence, not granted because of tradition. And I'm here to show that the best person for the job doesn't always look like what you expect." The platoon was silent now, listening intently. "I know some of you are skeptical," Sarah said. "That's fine, healthy even, don't take my word for anything. Watch what I do, see how I lead. Judge me by my actions, not by my gender or my reputation." She stopped in the center, facing them all. "And if any of you have a problem with serving under a female officer, talk to me about it. Directly. Honestly. Because I'd rather deal with doubts and concerns up front than let them fester into resentment." The soldiers shifted, exchanging glances. This wasn't what they'd expected. Most officers gave speeches about honor and duty. This one was talking about gender dynamics and hurt feelings. "One more thing," Sarah added. "What happened with Sergeant Webb? That wasn't my finest moment. I reacted emotionally instead of professionally. I let my frustration override my judgment, and someone got seriously hurt because of it." She let that sink in. "I'm not proud of that. I'm not going to pretend it was some kind of victory. It was a failure to control my emotions. a failure to handle a difficult situation with the professionalism I'd been trained to show. She paused. But I learned from it, and I'm asking you to learn from it too. What are we supposed to learn, ma'am? Jackson asked. That actions have consequences. That losing your cool, even when you're provoked, can derail everything you're trying to accomplish. And that the respect you earn through competence can disappear in seconds if you let your emotions take control. She looked around at their faces. Some were nodding, some still looked skeptical. That was okay. We start training tomorrow at 0600, Sarah said. Be ready to work, dismissed. The platoon dispersed, soldiers talking among themselves. Sarah watched them go, feeling the weight of their judgment. This was the real test. Not breaking Webb's leg in 3 seconds, not graduating from SEAL training. This, leading soldiers who knew her story and were waiting to see if she could back it up. That evening, Sarah sat in her quarters writing a report for the research program. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, documenting observations, challenges, and insights. Integration of female special operations personnel into conventional units presents unique challenges, she wrote. Soldiers bring preconceptions based on gender, but also based on reputation. The incident with Sergeant Webb has created both opportunities and obstacles. Opportunities: established credibility regarding physical capability, demonstrated consequences for harassment and hostile behavior, created opening for honest discussions about gender and leadership. Obstacles: set unrealistic expectations for constant displays of physical dominance, may have increased scrutiny and skepticism, potential for resentment from soldiers who view the incident as favoritism or special treatment. Her phone buzzed, a text from Captain Torres. Heard you got your platoon assignment. How's it going? Sarah smiled and typed back, ask me in 6 months. That bad? That complicated? You'll figure it out, you always do. Sarah appreciated the confidence, even if she didn't entirely share it. Leading a platoon was different from running a mission. Combat had clear objectives, defined enemies, straightforward success metrics. Leadership was messier, more personal, more human. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Specialist Jackson standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. Ma'am, do you have a minute? Of course, come in. Jackson entered hesitantly, his eyes taking in the sparse quarters. Sarah gestured to a chair and sat across from him. What's on your mind, Specialist? Ma'am, I just wanted to say, what you said today about the Sergeant Webb thing not being your finest moment, that took guts. Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's not what I expected you to say. Yeah, well, Jackson fidgeted with his hands. Most officers I've served under, they never admit to screwing up. They never show weakness, but you just stood there and told us you failed, that you learned from it. I did fail, Sarah said simply. Pretending otherwise wouldn't change that. I know, but, Jackson paused, gathering his thoughts. My sister tried to join the Marines last year, made it through boot camp, top of her class physically, but some of the instructors, they made her life hell, said she didn't belong, said she was taking a spot from a real Marine. She stuck it out for 8 months, then quit. Sarah felt her chest tighten. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, me too. Jackson met her eyes. She didn't have anyone like you, someone who'd already proven themselves, someone who could show her it was possible. Jackson, I'm just saying, ma'am, what you did to Webb. Yeah, maybe it was a mistake, but it also sent a message. It told every female soldier on this base that they don't have to take that shit, that they can stand up for themselves. Sarah considered her words carefully. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and breaking someone's leg. True, Jackson agreed. But sometimes people need to see what's possible before they can figure out what's right. After Jackson left, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, thinking about his words. She'd spent 3 months agonizing over her loss of control, over the way she'd let her emotions override her training. She'd viewed the incident as a failure, and in many ways it was. But maybe it was also something else. Maybe it was a catalyst, a moment that forced conversations that needed to happen, a demonstration that shifted perceptions and challenged assumptions. She thought about the 17 women who'd filed complaints against Webb, thought about all the others who'd stayed silent because they didn't think anyone would listen, thought about Jackson's sister, who'd given up her dream because the harassment became unbearable. The investigation into Webb had uncovered even more than the 17 documented complaints. Dozens of female soldiers had come forward with their own stories. The Army was finally taking action, implementing new training protocols, strengthening harassment policies, and holding leaders accountable for creating hostile environments. All because she'd broken a man's leg in 3 seconds. Sarah pulled up a blank email and began typing. Dear Captain Torres, you asked how integration is going. The honest answer is, it's complicated. I'm learning that leadership isn't about being the toughest or the fastest or the most highly trained. It's about being human, about admitting mistakes, about showing vulnerability while maintaining authority. The incident with Sergeant Webb will follow me for the rest of my career. Some people will see it as proof that women can't control themselves under pressure. Others will see it as justified self-defense. The truth, as usual, is somewhere in between. But I'm starting to understand something. My mission isn't just to study integration challenges. It's to be a bridge, to show that special operations training and conventional leadership aren't contradictory, to prove that acknowledging failure and maintaining credibility aren't mutually exclusive. I have 32 soldiers who are watching my every move, waiting to see if I'm the real deal or just another officer with a good story. I have a command structure that's watching to see if this whole integration experiment is viable. And I have a responsibility to every woman who might come after me, who might face the same challenges I did. So yeah, it's complicated, but it's also important, and I'm not backing down. Respectfully, LT Sarah Chen. She hit send and closed her laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new doubts, new opportunities to prove herself or fail spectacularly. But tonight, for the first time in months, Sarah felt something other than regret about what had happened with Webb. She felt purpose, direction, hope. Outside her window, the lights of Fort Carson glowed against the darkness. Thousands of soldiers preparing for sleep, training, deployment, life. Each one with their own story, their own struggles, their own potential. And somewhere among them, maybe there was another woman who'd heard about the SEAL who'd broken a sergeant's leg, who'd seen that strength didn't mean accepting abuse, that standing up for yourself sometimes meant standing alone. Sarah turned off the light and lay down. In 6 hours, she'd be up again, leading PT for her platoon, pushing them, challenging them, showing them what was possible when competence mattered more than gender. It wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But then again, easy had never been what she signed up for. She thought about Webb, recovering from his surgery, about the investigation that was dismantling his career, about the 17 women whose complaints were finally being taken seriously. And she thought about something her Bud-S instructor had told her during Hell Week, when she'd been ready to quit from exhaustion and pain. The moment you think you can't go on is the moment you're really beginning. Everything before that is just preparation for this.